Hey, good morning again, options traders. Well, today I wanted to talk a little bit about squares and butterflies. Because if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, one of the traders in our group asked for some trading tips on broken wing butterflies. And still working on that, but before we get into it, there are some preliminary things that you have to understand about butterflies because you're going to encounter them no matter what type of butterfly you're trading, but especially for broken wings. So for this video, we're going to talk about squares and butterflies. And the idea here is that it's very easy to overlook the things that you can't see. Whenever I have coached people on trading butterflies, they all see the butterfly in front of them, and that's the only thing that they trade. They open it and then they close it. But they don't understand that there are lots of butterflies, usually, hiding inside, what we call embedded butterflies or mini butterflies. So, is there a way that we can identify these and count how many potential butterflies you actually have to trade? And to do that, we have to understand some properties of squares. So, let's go find out what that's all about. As always, before we do, please be sure to click like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated and helps to promote the channel. Now, normally I don't like to get into too much math, but for this one, we kind of have to. It's a way to figure out how many butterflies you have. So I'm going to show you some interesting property of numbers, and we're going to start off with a quick definition. Again, I think most people know what this is all about, but there's a property of math that we can do. It's called squaring. And so it just means we're going to multiply that number by itself. So if we take 1 squared, and we represent that by raising it to this superscript 2, all that means is take 1 times itself. This little raised number tells us how many times we're multiplying it by itself. So because that number is 2, it just says multiply by itself twice. 1 times 1 is 1. What if we had 2 squared? Well, 2 squared is 2 times 2, which of course is 4. So 2 squared is 4. 3 squared is going to be 3 times 3 or 9. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25, and so on. Well, there's some really interesting properties about what are called square numbers and triangular numbers. There's a lot of interesting patterns going on here. And one of them is the difference in squares. So let's take the number 1 squared, which of course is 1. If we subtract off the previous number, which would be 0 squared or 0, we get 1. The next number in our list would be 2. 2 squared is 4. If I subtract off the previous square, or 1, we get 3. Next number in the list would be 3. 3 squared would be 9. If I subtract off the previous square of 4, we get 5. Next number in line would be 4. 4 squared would be 16. We subtract off the previous square of 9, we get 7. We do it again for 5. 5 squared is 25. We subtract off the previous square of 16, we get 9. And look what we have. We have the odd numbers. And so the difference of 2 squares is going to leave an odd number. All right, so what's going on here? Why is this happening? Well, it's kind of a related problem. But let's say we have a square. I'm going to do a 5 by 5 grid, which we know has 25 dots. That's, by the way, why it's called squaring. If we have a perfect square, you can create a square with it. So 5 squared is a perfect square, and we can therefore create a perfect square out of these dots. So notice if we have this number up here, let's say this is 1, this red dot. If I take the next odd number in line is 3 in blue, 1, 2, 3. And notice I can arrange them to where I get a perfect square, 2 by 2. The next odd number in the list is 5. So let's do those in green. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can arrange those next to these to where I get another perfect square right there. Now we've got a 3 by 3. Next number in the list would be 7. We can take these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can arrange them in a way to where I get another perfect square, this time a 4 by 4. I can take the next number in line, which is 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can arrange them in such a way that we get another perfect square. So this is a little bit more of the insights why these differences in squares is working. But take a look at this. What if we look at the diagonals? If we look at the diagonal here, we have 1 dot. If I look at this diagonal, we have 2. On this diagonal, we have 3. This diagonal, we have 4. This diagonal, we have 5. And then we go back 4, 3, 2, 1. So take a look at that pattern. This is what you're going to see in the embedded butterflies. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when we get that pattern, I can find out how many dots we have by simply taking the center number and squaring it. So if I get a number of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I know that we're dealing with a 25 grid or a 5 by 5, that we have 25 dots. And so that's going to be kind of a shortcut for figuring out how many butterflies you are potentially dealing with or could possibly trade. So let's look at a butterfly spread. Let's say that you buy the 100, 110, 120 butterfly, give it a price, doesn't matter, we'll say it's trading for $2. Your max loss is 2, that's the amount you paid, and your max gain would be 8. The maximum value for a butterfly is the difference in these, let's say these first 2 strikes. We could also take the difference in the second 2. That's assuming that they're equally spaced. We're going to find out for broken wing butterflies that's not true. But here they're spaced by 10, 100, 110, 120. So it's a 10-point butterfly for which we paid 2, and therefore the maximum gain is 8. So here we go. Here's the risk graph for the one we just saw. We get a bend at 100, one right there at 110, and one right here at 120. So look what happens. See, this is where most traders would look at that and say, I have one butterfly spread. I can see it right there in front of me. It's the 100, 110, 120. But what they don't see is that there are embedded butterflies or mini butterflies in here. So look what happens if we take the 100, 105, 110 butterfly. See, I can do this, and notice that the peak right here comes up halfway on this black line. And therefore, if I go to the next series of 3, 105, 110, 115, we're going to go twice as high. I've got 2 butterflies at the 105, 110, 115 strikes. And because this is the peak, we're now going to come back with the same numbers on the way down because it's symmetrical. Looks like an upside down V. So on this side, if we have the 110, 115, 120, we again get 1 butterfly. So how many butterflies do we have to potentially trade? See, again, most traders would say there's 1 here in black, but we don't. We have 4. We've got 1, 2, 1. And look at that. There's our 1, 2, 1 pattern. And so we can take that center number, 2 squared is 4. We have 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 1 is 4. There are 4 mini butterflies in there. Now, I've talked about this before, and a lot of times traders find this hard to believe, but it's absolutely mathematically true. If you run this in a pricing model, let's look at the original one in black, the 100, 110, 120 butterfly. Give it some parameters, days to expiration, volatility, whatever you want. Pricing model is going to kick out an answer. In this case, it was 386. But now let's break them apart. Let's look at the 100, 105, 110 here in blue. Pricing model says it's worth 94 cents. Let's look at the next one here, the 105, 110, 15. But remember, we have 2 of them. So I'm just going to print those twice. Pricing model says each one is worth $1.03. And then let's look at the one in green, which is the 110, 115, 120. We have 1. Pricing model says it's worth 86 cents. If we add these up, these 4 different spreads right here, what do you suppose we get? Look at that, 386, exactly what we got out here for the original butterfly. So it's absolutely 100% mathematically correct that when, in this case, you bought the 100, 110, 120 butterfly, you mathematically are trading these 4. But traders don't see that. So again, it's super easy to overlook things that are invisible, but they're there. And they might turn out to be an alligator spread. We talked about that in a recent video. If they're getting pretty close to the maximum, let's say this blue one, why do we want to hold it? Let's spin it out of there. It shouldn't be in there. It's a trading opportunity. It's the maximum amount you're ever going to get, more or less. What's it doing in there? But see, traders don't see it that way. They just hold the original butterfly. So because we have these prices the same at 386, we know that these four butterflies right here are absolutely identical to the original 100, 110, 120 butterfly. So take a look at this 1-2-1 structure. All right, we've got four butterflies. Go back to our squares. And if we look at these diagonals, there's one, there's two, there's one. There's our 1-2-1 butterfly. How many butterflies do we have? How many dots do we have? We have 2 squared. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 butterflies to trade. All right, let's go back to our butterfly. So here's the way that you can figure out. There's a number of ways, but here's the one that I think is the easiest. We have the 100, 110, 120 butterfly. Just count the number of steps to get to the center strike. All right, our left wing out here is 100, so we go one step out this way to 105, and we go 2 steps here to 110. 2 steps squared is 4. I can just tell by looking at that there are 4 mini butterflies in that. Now there's other ways. We could say the difference between 100 and 120 is 20. These are 5 points apart, so there's really 4 different steps in here, but we're trying to find the center, so we divide it by 2 and then square it. So if you get really super wide butterflies, it might be easier to just look at the difference in those wings. I just think it's easier to look how many steps do you have going from the left strike to the center. 2 steps, square it, you got 4 butterflies. It's just that easy. All right, let's try another one. How about the 100, 120, 140 butterfly? Now again, it depends on the increments that are traded for that particular option. They might be traded in $2.50 increments, $1 increments, $10 increments. So in this example, I'm assuming again that they are traded in $5 increments. Now that doesn't mean that's what you have to be trading, but these are the possible butterflies that we could be trading. So how many do we have in here? Well, let's go back to what we've learned so far and see if we can figure it out. The left wing is 100, so count the steps. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to get to the center strike. 4 squared is 16. We should have 16 embedded butterflies to trade. So here we go. There's one. There's the 100, 105, 110. Notice that we are only a quarter of the way up this black line. Let's move over to the 105, 110, 115. Now we're 2/4 of the way up, or half way up this black line. Move over to the next one, 110, 115, 120. We are 3/4 of the way up that line. And finally, when we hit our center strike here, what's called the body, that center strike, 115, 120, 125, we have 4/4 or 1. We're at the peak. And because that black V is symmetrical, what does that tell you coming down the other side? We're going to have 3, 2, 1 on this side. So based on what we talked about with our squares, what do you see? You should see 4 squared or 16. And here we go. If we look at this diagonal, there's 1, there's 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's what we just saw, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. What does that tell you about the number of dots? Take 4, that's the one in the center, squared is 16. We know there's 16 dots. And so we know right off the bat we have 16 butterflies that we have to manage. So if you can't look at a butterfly spread and tell how many butterfly or embedded butterflies that you have in there, you are absolutely missing the very essence of trading butterflies. All right, so let's take a look at a little quiz here. So let's say that you are trading the 200, 210, 220 butterfly. And we look at our broker's platform and they're listed in 10-point strikes. So the first question is, how many embedded butterflies are there? Well, how many steps are there from the left wing out here to the center? Remember, we have to count by tens because they're listed in 10-point increments. So we go 1, and there we go. We're at 210. We're at that center strike. We only took 1 step. So there's 1 butterfly. You're looking at it, 200, 210, 220. And that should make sense because we can't trade the 200, 205, 210. This is it. So that is 1 butterfly. But now let's say we look at our broker's platform and we see that for this expiration, they are listed in 5-point strikes. So ask yourself, how many steps do I take if I can count by fives from 200 to 210? I can go 205, 210. There's 2 steps. 2 squared is 4. I know that there are 4 embedded butterflies in that butterfly. What if we look at our broker's platform and they're listed in 2.5-point strikes? Well, now we get to count by half as much, so we should have twice as many. We had 2 before, we should have 4 now. 4 squared is 16, right? And if you don't follow that, just start from 200. Go 200, 202.50, there's 1 step, 205, 207.50, and then 210. There's 4 steps to get from 200 to 210 if you're counting by 2.5-point increments. So 4 steps squared is 16. There will be 16 butterflies in that spread if they are listed in 2.5-point increments. So listen, I know it can be confusing, but hopefully you got the gist of it. Just count how many steps you take from your left wing to the center, square it, and that's how many embedded butterflies you have. Because if you can't look at your butterfly spread and see how many mini butterflies there are, you're missing the very essence of what you're trying to trade. So remember, it's always easy to overlook the things that you can't see. And if you can't see the many trading opportunities in front of you, you're going to miss potentially many great trades, or as we've talked about before, end up in an alligator spread. And for anyone who'd like to learn more about the art and science of options trading, please check out the Alpha Trader course, Strategy Lab, and a Candlesticks and Technical Analysis course. It's all at optionsatoz.com. Also, please join us on Options A to Z's Facebook trading group, and you can find a link in the description below.